It's a Friday afternoon. You're stuck in traffic. You look up into the sky and 3 Marine helicopters go flying over. For a brief moment, you're jealous. After all, it would be a much faster way home. Then you wonder, what are they doing up there? Joint Base McGuire Dix Lakehurst, located in Plain and Flat, Central New Jersey, is one of the busiest military facilities in the country. It's the only Department of Defense facility in the United States with 3 bases in one. The whole area covers 60 square miles, and more than 44,000 military personnel and their families live and work on the base. To put that in perspective, if you move the base to Wyoming, it would be the biggest city by area and the 3rd biggest by population. I spent a weekend with the Marines of MAG 49, Marine Aircraft Group 49, to understand why, when, and how they fly. MAG 49 has 2 squadrons, HMH 772, the Hustlers, which fly CH-53E Super Stallion transport helicopters, and HMLA 773, the Red Dog Squadron, which flies Viper attack helicopters and Hueys. The weekend we visited was a reserve drill weekend, which means Marines who have normal day jobs come for a few days to sharpen their skills. For some, this is turning wrenches. For others, it's a bit more exciting than that. But before any of this can happen, the maintainers who keep these aircraft running have to spend upwards of 10 hours prepping, and the pilots who fly these training missions have to put together a plan.
All right, so Big Blue River tonight, we're gonna take off from McGuire, go south around the range into the FARP, do a hot load at the FARP, take off, daytime SWD time on station, go back to the FARP for hot download, egress to the north, back to McGuire, shut down for cold gas, and then do it all again once it gets dark. Dash 2, you got Lakehurst Tower, Comp 3, just double check, make sure they're closed or that nobody's working.
So in true military form, a lot of acronyms. Clearly the pilots and the crew understand everything that was being put forward. Even though it's a relatively clear day and we're not in a combat zone, they treat every flight like there is that level of intensity.
But first, Corporal Ryan, one of the crew chief on our bird, has to give us a safety brief.
How that's going to look is it's going to have 1 in between your legs, 2 that go over your lap, and then 2 that come over your shoulder.
Today's mission isn't just for the pilots, though. We're going on board as they practice firing rockets and 50 caliber rounds from the 50 cal machine gun and GAU Gatling gun, each mounted on one side of the aircraft. This is also training for the ordnance teams, or ORTEs, who practice safely loading the weapons in the field. A Marine Huey and Cobra may look like the helicopters flown over Vietnam, but their shape is misleading. These are new helicopters, built from the ground up with modern avionics and weapon systems. They're also a twin-engine, 4-rotor aircraft. The thing that struck me about embedding with the Marines is that they are unflappable. Even though I was in the Navy and I've flown on military aircraft before, this was an exciting moment for me to be on board as the Marines fired off rounds. As you can see, I get excited when the force of the gun being fired by Sergeant Herrera causes the window next to our cameraman to explode. The crew, though, they're entirely unfazed.
You got blood all over here.
My nose just started bleeding in the middle of us flying. It's the concussion of the 50 cal.
I totally get it.
But just because the excitement is over for us, that doesn't mean the day is over for the Marines of MAG 49. We have another training flight tomorrow, and the rest of the building has to prepare.
It's nighttime here on the flight line. yet the work continues on. And this space is a 24-hour operation. There are people here that are working late into the night to make sure that these helicopters can fly and fly safe. Once a month, you guys are here late preparing for the reservists to come in, right? For just an hour, there are literally hours and hours that go into the maintenance, into the operation, safety, just admin, anything you can think of. It's not just maintenance. There's a whole set of things that have to go in to keeping this entire operation, well, operating. So let's head into maintenance. We were just talking about how nighttime doesn't mean that work stops. So what else do you have to do from like an administrative standpoint to make sure that these birds can fly?
So as far as maintenance control side of the house, we dictate all maintenance that happens. So you see the Marines out on the aircraft, that what they're doing comes from in the shop.
So the first deck is primarily the maintenance spaces. It's the shops that do the work on the planes, on the helicopters. The second floor is the squadron spaces. It's primarily where administrative and operational stuff takes place. And even though, as we've learned, it's not just wrench turners that are here late, there's also a contingency from that. So walk in here to the squadron ready room, and we have Lance Corporal Hernandez, who's still here, and in large part, he's here because the squadron still has 2 planes out flying. And Lance Corporal he has to stay here until the planes return. There's additional administrative work he has to do. Give us an idea of what it is that they need from you and what you need to do to make sure that they can operate safely.
So the things that I normally need from them once they're flying is knowing the location and the section that they're going to beforehand. So that's why normally during the brief section, we get informed and we develop the flight plan. Once they give me the flight plan, I know where they're flying to. So I write it down on the ODO logbook, the record book, which we keep. And every time when we write it down, we know where they're at. If anything were to happen to the pilots or the aircraft, we have it on record.
So this is a 24-hour operation. And yes, that includes maintenance. Yes, that includes operations, but it also includes a representative for the CO. So someone's got to be here 24 hours in case that phone rings and be here to answer it. So let's go meet that person. So the first question I want to ask you, Gunnery Sergeant, is can you tell us why the lights are off?
Yes, sir. That's a very good question. I turn the lights off because it creates a glare, and with the lights off, I can actually see if anybody's approaching the building. Just makes it easier on the eyes.
So it's not because you're sleeping, obviously. And what are your hours? It's clearly not 9 to 5. Clearly the CO is not here, but how many hours are you going to be holding this post?
I am here from 0900 to 0900 tomorrow, 24-hour post.
So it's a 24-hour post. Even if aircraft aren't flying, you're still here, is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
That also counts New Year's Eve, Christmas,
Yes.
Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, any holiday. Someone's got to be here to answer that phone. So super excited to go on one of the most picturesque training missions that the Marines have. We're going to fly up the coast, see the Statue of Liberty, and the weather looks great.
And so I've got our route out here, but as you can see, there's pretty significant, obviously red is the worst and green's like, a little bit better, but pretty significant cells that are, wrapping right around McGuire right now.
Eventually, the decision is made by the pilots to follow the fast-moving thunderstorms into New York. Which gets us back to our original question, why do these flights happen? I spoke with Brigadier General Len Anderson, who commands the 4th Marine Air Wing, or MAW, and he made an important point. Each flight out on one of these aircraft costs $15,000. That means that a reserve pilot, like the 2 who flew with us, each one is roughly a $15 million investment by the taxpayers. Not only from a force preparedness standpoint, but also from a financial one. It's much easier to keep Marine Reserve pilots ready to fly than it is to constantly train new ones. And while the view of the Statue of Liberty is a special one, the reality is that there's almost no airspace outside of a combat situation that is quite as complex as the one over New York City. In peacetime, it's easy to forget we have a military. The Marines of MAG 49 don't have that luxury. It's their job to be ready for situations the average person doesn't even want to imagine. So if you see a military helicopter flying overhead, I want you to understand that it isn't a joyride. It isn't a clever way around traffic. It's 100 hours of preparation and thousands of hours of training. It's women and men making sure we're ready for a time we hope never comes, but often does.